Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun rose lazily over the quiet village of Mwagu, its golden rays caressing the thatched roofs of small mud houses and glinting off the dew-soaked leaves of palm trees. The air was filled with the aroma of fresh akara frying in roadside kiosks, mingling with the earthy scent of damp soil after a light overnight rain. Children chased each other barefooted across dusty paths, their laughter carrying through the crisp air like music. Life here was simple, and for many, it was enough. For Nadia, life had once been beautiful in this village. She was the only child of Mr. and Mrs. Okoro, two of the most respected people in Mwagu. Her father, a schoolteacher, was known for his sharp mind and dedication to educating the village's children. Her mother, a seamstress, had an infectious warmth and kindness that made her beloved by all. Together, they had raised Nadia in a home filled with love, laughter, and dreams of a bright future. But fate had been cruel. 5 years ago, both her parents had died suddenly, leaving her world shattered. The villagers whispered about poisoned food or a mysterious illness, but no one knew the full truth, or so it seemed. At just 16, Nadia had been left with no family other than her father's younger brother, Anyi. Uncle Anyi, as he insisted she call him, had initially welcomed Nadia into his home with open arms. "You are my daughter now," he had said with a smile, his hand on her shoulder. At first, he seemed kind, even doting. But as time went on, the cracks in his facade began to show. Life in Uncle Anyi's house. Uncle Anyi lived in the largest house in the village, a cement building painted in bright yellow, with a wide compound surrounded by a low fence. It was a stark contrast to the humble, modest home Nadia had once shared with her parents. His wealth came from a booming trade in palm oil and timber, but it was his charisma that made him a popular figure in Mwagu. He was often seen in the company of younger women, his loud laughter echoing in the evenings as he entertained them with drinks and music. For the first few months, Nadia stayed mostly out of sight, grieving the loss of her parents and adjusting to her new reality. She helped with chores, prepared meals, and tried to keep herself busy. But Uncle Anyi's mood began to shift. "You eat my food, you sleep in my house," he would say, his voice sharp with irritation. "At least show gratitude." He started treating her like an unpaid servant. She cooked for him, cleaned his house, and did his laundry, all while enduring his complaints and occasional slaps when he felt she was too slow or didn't do something to his liking. Worse still were the late nights. Nadia would lie awake in her small room, listening to the voices of women giggling and Uncle Anyi's booming laughter from the parlor. She hated the way he behaved, but she had no choice but to endure it. The day everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon when Uncle Anyi's cruelty reached its peak. Nadia had been scrubbing the floor of the parlor, a bucket of soapy water beside her. Sweat trickled down her face as she worked diligently, her hands red and sore. Uncle Anyi barged in, his face flushed with anger. "Nadia!" he barked, startling her so much that she almost dropped the brush. "Where is my lunch? You think I brought you here to laze around like a queen?" "I'm sorry, Uncle," she said quickly, rising to her feet. "I'll prepare it now." He glared at her, his nostrils flaring. "Useless girl," he muttered before storming out. An hour later, she served him a plate of yam porridge. He barely glanced at it before throwing the plate across the room, the food splattering on the wall. "What is this nonsense?" he roared. "You think I'll eat this rubbish?" Nadia froze, her hands trembling. "I did my best, Uncle," she stammered. "Your best is not good enough," he shouted. Then, with a chilling calmness, he pointed to the door. "Get out of my house." Her heart stopped. "Please, I have nowhere to go," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. "Not my problem. Find somewhere else to be useless. I need space to enjoy my life." Nadia begged, fell to her knees, and pleaded, but Uncle Anyi was unmoved. He threw her few belongings into a tattered bag and shoved her out into the compound, slamming the gate shut behind her. Life on the streets. The journey from Mwagu to the city of Lagos was long and grueling. With no money and nowhere to go, Nadia had to rely on the kindness of strangers for food and transport. Some were sympathetic to her plight, while others treated her with disdain, seeing her as just another homeless beggar. Her first night in Lagos was a nightmare. The streets were noisy, crowded, and filled with danger. She curled up under a rickety wooden stall in a marketplace, trying to block out the sounds of drunken men shouting and stray dogs barking. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she was too scared to move. Days turned into weeks, and Nadia learned to survive. She begged for leftover food from restaurants, drank water from public taps, and avoided the gangs that prowled the streets. It was a harsh, unforgiving life, but she refused to give up. Deep inside, a spark of hope remained, a belief that things would one day get better. Chance encounter. One fateful evening, as she sat on the pavement watching the sun dip below the horizon, a woman approached her. She was elegantly dressed, her dark skin glowing in the fading light, and her eyes filled with concern. "Hello, my dear," the woman said gently. "What are you doing out here?" Nadia hesitated, unsure if she could trust her. But something about the woman's demeanor felt safe. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Amara, listened patiently as Nadia recounted her story. When she finished, Mrs. Amara smiled and extended a hand. "Come with me. You don't belong here." For the first time in months, Nadia felt a glimmer of hope. She took Mrs. Amara's hand, unaware that this moment would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The journey from the bustling streets of Lagos to Mrs. Amara's home was surreal for Nadia. It had been months since she had felt the warmth of human kindness, and the woman's offer of help felt almost too good to be true. They rode in Mrs. Amara's sleek black SUV, a vehicle so luxurious that Nadia was too afraid to lean back fully in the seat. Mrs. Amara was a woman in her early 50s, with an air of elegance that suggested she was used to a life of comfort. She wore a cream-colored Ankara dress with intricate patterns, and her braided hair was neatly wrapped in a scarf. Her soft yet authoritative voice calmed Nadia as they drove through the city's busy streets. "You're safe now," Mrs. Amara said, glancing at Nadia. "Whatever happened before, you can leave it behind. You have a chance to start over." Nadia nodded but said nothing, her mind swirling with questions. Who was this woman? Why was she helping her? Could she be trusted? She wanted to believe Mrs. Amara's words, but life had taught her to be cautious. A new beginning. Mrs. Amara's home was in a quiet, gated estate on the outskirts of Lagos. As they entered, Nadia's eyes widened at the sight of the well-manicured lawns, paved driveways, and rows of beautiful houses. The house they stopped in front of was painted a soft yellow, with a large wooden door and flower pots lining the front porch. "This is my home," Mrs. Amara said as she led Nadia inside. The interior was just as impressive, spacious, with polished wooden floors, elegant furniture, and paintings adorning the walls. Nadia stood awkwardly in the foyer, clutching her tattered bag. "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Mrs. Amara said firmly. "Helping you is enough." She showed Nadia to a small guest room at the back of the house. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a wardrobe, and a small desk. To Nadia, it felt like a palace compared to the streets she had been sleeping on. "You can stay here for as long as you need," Mrs. Amara said. "But I have one condition. You must promise to work hard to rebuild your life." "I promise," Nadia said, her voice trembling with gratitude. Finding her footing. In the days that followed, Nadia began to settle into her new life. Mrs. Amara treated her like family, providing her with clothes, food, and the support she desperately needed. But she also made it clear that Nadia couldn't remain dependent on her forever. "You're a bright young woman," she told Nadia one morning over breakfast. "The world is full of opportunities if you're willing to seize them." Mrs. Amara helped Nadia secure a job as a receptionist at a small corporate office in Lagos. The work was challenging at first. Nadia had little experience with computers or office procedures, But she was determined to succeed. She stayed late after hours to learn how to use the software, took notes during meetings, and asked questions whenever she was unsure. Her boss, Mr. Ade, was a stern but fair man who quickly noticed her dedication. "You have potential, Nadia," he told her one day. "Keep this up and you'll go far." Rising through the ranks. Over the next few years, Nadia's hard work began to pay off. She was promoted to an administrative assistant, then to a project coordinator. With each new role, she gained more confidence and skills, building a reputation as a reliable and resourceful employee. But Nadia wasn't just focused on her career. She enrolled in evening classes at a local college, studying business management. She knew that education was the key to unlocking even greater opportunities, and she was willing to sacrifice sleep and leisure to achieve her goals. Through it all, Mrs. Amara remained a constant source of support. She celebrated Nadia's successes, encouraged her during setbacks, and reminded her of the strength she possessed. "You're like a daughter to me," she told Nadia one evening as they sat on the veranda, watching the sunset. "Your parents would be proud of the woman you're becoming." The turning point. By the time Nadia was 24, she had saved enough money to start her own business. Drawing on her experience in the corporate world, she launched a small consulting firm that helped local entrepreneurs streamline their operations and access funding. It was a risky venture, but Nadia's determination and resourcefulness paid off. Within 2 years, her firm became one of the most sought after in Lagos. She secured contracts with major companies, hired a team of talented employees, and expanded her services to other cities. Her success brought her financial stability and recognition, but she never forgot her humble beginnings. Nadia began giving back to the community, organizing workshops for underprivileged youth and funding scholarships for students in need. She wanted to be the kind of support system that she had lacked during her darkest days. A return to Umwagu. One day, while reviewing proposals in her office, Nadia received a letter from the village chief of Umwagu. He had heard about her success and invited her to visit the village for a community development project. Nadia hadn't returned to Umwagu since the day Uncle Anyi had thrown her out. The thought of going back filled her with a mix of emotions: nostalgia for her childhood, sorrow for her parents' loss, and anger toward the man who had betrayed her. But she knew she had to go. It was time to confront her past and give back to the place where her story had begun. As the plane touched down in Enugu, Nadia took a deep breath. This wasn't just a journey to the village, it was a journey to uncover the truth about her parents, reclaim her identity, and redefine her legacy. Nadia's return to Umwagu was nothing short of surreal. The dirt roads she once walked barefoot as a child seemed narrower, and the small mud houses appeared even smaller than she remembered. Yet, the scent of the village, the rich aroma of freshly tilled earth, the fragrance of blooming hibiscus flowers, and the smoky tang of burning firewood brought a wave of nostalgia crashing over her. She had come back as a different person, no longer the helpless orphan who had been thrown out onto the streets, but a woman of power, wealth, and purpose. The village's transformation was her mission, and she would ensure that no one else endured what she had. A hero's welcome. As Nadia's convoy of sleek SUVs rolled into the village square, a crowd gathered to see the return of their prodigal daughter. Whispers of admiration rippled through the crowd. "Is that really Nadia Okoro? She looks like a queen. See how far she has come. God is good." Nadia stepped out of the car, her head held high. She wore a simple yet elegant Ankara dress, her hair styled in neat cornrows. She smiled warmly at the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging greetings. The village chief, a portly man named Chief Mbakwe, approached her with outstretched arms. "NWM, welcome home," he said, using the Igbo term for my child. "We have heard of your achievements, and we are proud of you." "Thank you, Chief," Nadia replied, bowing slightly in respect. "It's good to be back." The chief led her to the town hall, where a meeting was held to discuss the proposed development projects. Nadia outlined her plans: rebuilding the village school, constructing a modern health clinic, and installing a borehole to provide clean water. The villagers listened in awe, their faces lighting up with hope. For many of them, Nadia's success felt like their own victory. A symbol of what was possible even for those who came from the humblest beginnings. Revisiting the past. After the meeting, Nadia decided to visit her childhood home. The small house where she had spent her happiest years now stood abandoned, its walls crumbling and its once vibrant garden overgrown with weeds. She ran her fingers along the peeling paint of the front door, memories flooding back. "This was your parents' house," an old voice said behind her. Nadia turned to see Mama Yugo, an elderly neighbor who had been a close friend of her mother. The old woman's face was etched with wrinkles, but her eyes still held a spark of warmth. "Yes, Mama," Nadia said, her voice thick with emotion. "It feels like a lifetime ago." Mama Yugo sighed deeply. "Your parents were good people. What happened to them was a tragedy." Nadia frowned. "Mama, do you know what really happened to them?" The old woman hesitated, glancing around as if to ensure they were alone. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "There are things you need to know, my child. Your uncle. He is not the man you think he is." A shocking revelation. Mama Yugo invited Nadia to her small hut, where she poured her a cup of steaming herbal tea. As they sat on low stools, the old woman began to speak in hushed tones. "Your parents' deaths were not an accident," she said. "They were poisoned." Nadia's heart stopped. "Poisoned? By who?" Mama Yugo hesitated, then said, "By your Uncle Anyi." The words hit Nadia like a thunderclap. "That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "Why would he do such a thing?" "For greed," Mama Yugo replied bitterly. "Your father owned large parcels of land and had savings that he planned to use for your education. Anyi wanted it all for himself. He saw your father as an obstacle, so he got rid of him, and your mother, too, because she knew the truth." Nadia felt as though the ground beneath her had vanished. The man who had taken her in after her parents' deaths, who had claimed to be her protector, was the one who had destroyed her family. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Nadia asked, tears streaming down her face. "Anyi is a powerful man," Mama Yugo said. "He bribed the elders to keep quiet. Those who tried to speak out were threatened, or worse." Nadia clenched her fists, her sorrow giving way to anger. "He won't get away with this." Gathering evidence. Determined to bring Uncle Anyi to justice, Nadia began to investigate. She met with villagers who had worked closely with her father, piecing together the puzzle of his death. Many were reluctant to speak at first, fearing Uncle Anyi's wrath, but Nadia's persistence, and her promise to protect them, eventually won them over. She discovered that her father had suspected Anyi's treachery shortly before his death. He had confided in a close friend, Mr. Obina, who kept a journal detailing their conversations. The journal included chilling details: Anyi's threats, his financial struggles, and his desperate attempts to seize control of the family's assets. Nadia also learned that the village herbalist, who had prepared the poisoned food, had confessed on his deathbed. His testimony, recorded by a visiting priest, was damning evidence. Confronting Uncle Anyi. With enough evidence in hand, Nadia arranged a meeting with the local police. She presented her findings, which included eyewitness testimonies, Mr. Obina's journal, and the priest's account. The case was airtight. The police wasted no time. They stormed Uncle Anyi's house early one morning, arresting him in front of his latest mistress. The villagers watched in stunned silence as he was dragged away in handcuffs. Nadia was there, standing tall as he was led past her. For the first time, Uncle Anyi's arrogance faltered. His eyes darted nervously and he muttered, "Nadia, please. I'm your family." "You stopped being my family the day you killed my parents," Nadia replied coldly. "Now you'll face the consequences." Justice served. The trial was swift and public. With overwhelming evidence against him, Uncle Anyi was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The villagers, who had once feared him, now shunned him entirely. His downfall was complete, and justice had finally been served. For Nadia, the victory was bittersweet. She had avenged her parents, but the pain of their loss remained. Still, she knew they would have been proud of her courage and resilience. Moving forward. With Uncle Anyi gone, Nadia focused on fulfilling her promise to transform Umwagu. The school was rebuilt, the clinic was equipped with modern facilities, and the new borehole provided clean water for the entire village. She also started a mentorship program for young girls, teaching them the skills and confidence they needed to succeed. Nadia's return to Mwagu marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for the entire village. Her journey from despair to triumph became a source of inspiration, proving that even the darkest past could give way to a brighter future. Nadia sat in her mother's garden, which she had lovingly restored after her return to Mwagu. The soft hum of the evening breeze carried the scent of fresh hibiscus flowers, a smell that reminded her of happier days. The air felt lighter now that justice had been served, but the weight of her parents' loss still lingered. Uncle Anyi's arrest had answered many questions, yet it also opened the door to lingering pain and the need for closure. Rebuilding the past. Nadia dedicated much of her time to learning more about her parents, piecing together stories from the villagers and family friends. Each conversation brought her closer to understanding who they had been and how deeply they had loved her. It was through these interactions that she began to grasp the full extent of Uncle Anyi's betrayal. "He was jealous of your father's success," said Mr. Obinna, her father's childhood friend. "Your father was respected because of his integrity. Anyi, on the other hand, always sought shortcuts." The stories painted a picture of her father as a man of honor, a visionary who had hoped to uplift the community through education and hard work. Her mother, too, had been a beacon of hope, running a small sewing business that employed several young women in the village. Together, they had embodied the values of hard work, kindness, and humility. "They loved you deeply," Mama Yugo said one evening, her eyes moist with tears. "Your mother always said you were the greatest blessing of her life." The knowledge filled Nadia with pride and sorrow. She resolved to ensure their legacy endured, even in their absence. A village transformed. The projects Nadia had spearheaded in Mwagu were beginning to bear fruit. The once neglected school now bustled with activity, its classrooms filled with eager students. The new clinic provided free healthcare to villagers who had previously suffered in silence. Farmers no longer trekked miles for clean water, thanks to the borehole that Nadia had installed in the village square. Yet, Nadia knew that true transformation required more than infrastructure. She began organizing workshops to teach villagers financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and modern farming techniques. She encouraged the women of the village to form cooperatives, giving them the tools to become financially independent. One of her proudest moments came during the opening of a vocational training center she had built. The center offered courses in tailoring, carpentry, and technology, equipping young people with skills that could change their lives. As she stood before the crowd during the inauguration ceremony, Nadia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "This is not just my achievement," she told the villagers. "It is ours. Together, we are building a future that our children will be proud of." The power of forgiveness. Despite the progress, Nadia struggled with the emotional toll of her journey. While she had brought Uncle Anyi to justice, the pain of his betrayal still gnawed at her. She sought counsel from the village priest, Father Chaik, a soft-spoken man with a kind smile. "Forgiveness does not mean condoning what he did," Father Chaik told her during one of their conversations. "It means freeing yourself from the anger that holds you captive. You've already ensured justice. Now, let go of the bitterness." It wasn't easy, but Nadia began the slow process of forgiving Uncle Anyi. She prayed for strength and wrote letters she never intended to send, pouring out her emotions on paper. Over time, the anger that had consumed her began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace. "I forgive you," she whispered one evening, staring at the stars. "Not for your sake, but for mine." The truth behind the silence. While Nadia worked to heal, new revelations emerged about why so many villagers had remained silent about Uncle Anyi's crimes. During a gathering of the elders, Chief Mbakwe confessed that he and others had been bribed to suppress the truth. "We failed you, Nadia," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "We were afraid of Anyi's power, but that doesn't excuse our actions. Please forgive us." Nadia's initial reaction was one of anger, but as she listened to the chief's remorse, she realized that holding on to resentment would serve no purpose. "I forgive you," she said after a long silence. "But I hope this serves as a lesson for all of us. Silence in the face of injustice only allows evil to thrive. Her words resonated deeply, sparking a renewed commitment among the villagers to uphold honesty and integrity. Reconnecting with the land. One of Nadia's most ambitious projects was reclaiming her father's farmland, which Uncle Anyi had taken over after her parents' death. The land, once a lush expanse of fertile soil, had been neglected and overrun with weeds. Nadia hired local farmers to help her restore it, planting cassava, yams, and maize. She also introduced modern irrigation techniques, turning the farm into a model of sustainable agriculture. The produce was sold at fair prices, with a portion of the profits reinvested into the village. The farm became a symbol of renewal, a testament to her parents' vision and her determination to honor their legacy. It also provided jobs for dozens of villagers, lifting many families out of poverty. Confronting her legacy. As the months passed, Nadia's work in Umwaga began to attract attention beyond the village. Journalists wrote articles about her transformative projects, and government officials sought her advice on community development. Yet, for Nadia, the most meaningful recognition came from the villagers themselves. "You've done more for us than we could have ever imagined," one elder told her during a village meeting. "Your parents would be proud." Their words filled Nadia with a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that her journey wasn't just about avenging her parents or rebuilding the village. It was about finding her own place in the world, shaped by the values they had instilled in her. A message to the future. Nadia's final act in Umwagu was the creation of a community library named in honor of her parents. The Okora Memorial Library housed books on a wide range of topics, from history and science to fiction and poetry. It became a place of learning and inspiration for children and adults alike. During the library's opening ceremony, Nadia gave a heartfelt speech. "This library is not just a building," she said. "It is a reminder that knowledge is power and that even the smallest dreams can grow into something extraordinary." As the villagers cheered, Nadia felt a profound sense of closure. She had faced her past, honored her parents' legacy, and transformed the pain of her journey into a source of hope for others. The sun rose gently over Umwagu, casting its golden light across the village that had blossomed into a beacon of hope and progress. Nadia stood on the balcony of her family home, now fully restored, watching as life unfolded below. Farmers worked the fields with renewed vigor, children played in the schoolyard, and women gathered at the market, their laughter filling the air. This was the village her parents had dreamed of, and Nadia had turned that dream into reality. A legacy fulfilled. Nadia's work in Umwagu was far from over, but the transformation was undeniable. The vocational training center had empowered dozens of young people to start their own businesses. The clinic had saved countless lives, and the clean water provided by the borehole had drastically reduced illness in the community. The library, too, had become a hub of learning, drawing visitors from neighboring villages who marveled at its vast collection. The most remarkable change, however, was the spirit of the people. They had shed the fear and complacency that had once defined their lives, embracing a culture of collaboration and progress. Nadia knew her parents' values, hard work, integrity, and kindness, were now deeply ingrained in the community. "It's your legacy now," she told a group of villagers during a meeting. "You have the power to continue building this dream." Personal growth and healing. Nadia had come a long way since the days of sleeping on the streets of Lagos. Her journey had been one of pain and loss, but also of resilience and triumph. She had faced her darkest fears, confronted her greatest adversary, and emerged stronger than she had ever imagined. Yet, the journey had also taught her the importance of self-care and finding joy amidst the responsibilities. One evening, as she strolled through the village, she came across a group of young girls sitting under a tree, reading books from the library. One of them looked up and called out, "Auntie Nadia, when I grow up, I want to be like you." The words warmed her heart. She knelt beside the girls and said, "You can be anything you want to be. Just believe in yourself and never stop learning." The interaction reminded her of the power of mentorship and the importance of nurturing the next generation. Nadia began hosting weekly sessions at the library, sharing her story and encouraging the youth to dream big. The final confrontation. Though Uncle Anyi had been sentenced to life in prison, Nadia decided to visit him one last time. She needed closure, not for his sake, but for hers. The prison was a stark, cold place, its high walls and iron gates a fitting symbol of the life Anyi had created for himself. When Nadia entered the visiting room, she found him sitting at a metal table, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of its former self. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He looked up and froze when he saw her. "Nadia," he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. She sat across from him, her expression calm but firm. "I didn't come here to seek revenge or to gloat," she said. "I came to tell you that I've forgiven you." Anyi's eyes widened in disbelief. You've forgiven me? After everything I did?" "Yes," Nadia said. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I won't let your actions define me or control my life any longer." Anyi lowered his head, his shoulders shaking as he wept. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though the words felt too little, too late. Nadia stood and looked at him one last time. "I hope you find redemption, uncle. But your sins are yours to bear." As she walked out of the prison, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had finally let go of the anger that had haunted her for so long. A love rekindled. As Nadia poured her energy into rebuilding Umwagu, she found companionship in an old friend, Chaik, who had been her classmate in primary school. Chaik had returned to the village after studying engineering abroad and now worked as a consultant on her development projects. Their shared passion for improving the community brought them closer, and soon, their friendship blossomed into love. Chaik's quiet strength and unwavering support became a source of comfort for Nadia, and she found herself dreaming of a future that included not just the village, but also a family of her own. One evening, as they stood by the restored farmland watching the sunset, Chaik turned to her and said, "You've given so much to this village, Nadia. But what about your own happiness? You deserve a life filled with love and joy." Nadia smiled, her heart full. "I think I've already found it, Chaik." A celebration of life. The villagers organized a grand celebration to honor Nadia's contributions to Umwagu. The square was decorated with colorful banners, and people from neighboring communities gathered to join the festivities. There was dancing, music, and a feast that lasted well into the night. During the celebration, Chief Mbakwe presented Nadia with a plaque inscribed with the words, "To Nadia Okaro, the beacon of hope who turned tragedy into triumph and inspired us all." As she accepted the honor, Nadia addressed the crowd. "This village made me who I am," she said. "It taught me resilience, kindness, and the importance of community. Everything I've done is a reflection of the love my parents gave me and the strength I found in all of you." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in years, Nadia felt truly at peace. Happily ever after. Nadia chose to remain in Umwagu, dividing her time between managing her businesses in the city and continuing her work in the village. She and Chaik married in a simple yet beautiful ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. Together, they built a life rooted in love, service, and gratitude. As the years passed, Umwagu became a model for rural development, attracting visitors and investors from across the country. Nadia's legacy grew, not just in the village, but far beyond its borders. On quiet evenings, as she sat on her veranda watching the stars, Nadia often thought of her parents. She knew they would be proud of the woman she had become. Their love and sacrifices had shaped her journey, and she had ensured that their legacy would live on. In the end, Nadia found not only success but also fulfillment, joy, and a sense of purpose that no amount of wealth could ever replace. She had turned her pain into power, her loss into legacy, and her struggles into a story that would inspire generations to come. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.